was in my early 20s. I jumped into a marriage with someone I thought I knew, but clearly didn't. Both of us made mistakes and were far from perfect, but the fact was, we were just toxic for each other. I had always been told that he was different and that he sensed things, and on occasion, saw things he couldn't explain. I didn't really know what to think about it until I had my own experiences at his family's farm. After we were married, we moved into his childhood home. He had told me he saw things there and had things happen he couldn't explain. Some of those things would scare him so much he used to sleep with his lights on. I wasn't sure why we were moving in if he had such terrifying experiences there, but the house was paid for and we didn't have a lot of financial history. It was a logical and easy thing to do. I started noticing small incidents after about a year of living there. There were times I knew I was alone, yet I had the distinct impression I was not. On a few occasions, I heard someone walking around in the back rooms as well as closing doors, but I chalked it up to the cat being rambunctious. One morning before I went to work, my stereo turned on by itself with the volume turned all the way up. It scared the bejesus out of me. I ran to turn it off and saw that it was unplugged. I didn't know what to do. I was already running late, so I grabbed my keys and went to work, as if nothing had happened. 2.5 years into our marriage, we started arguing a lot over ridiculous things. After one throwdown, he went outside to mow the lawn, and I started cleaning up the bathroom in our bedroom because I thought it would settle me down. I was wiping off the vanity, and it became cold in the room. This was odd because it was July in the South. It gets so hot here that it's a running joke that it's hotter than hell's doorstep. So I thought maybe he turned down the AC and I went back to cleaning. All of a sudden, I heard the bedroom door open. I thought it was him coming back in to fight more about something else, so I was automatically pissed off. I heard someone walking, and when I looked up, I saw a reflection in the vanity mirror. It was not my husband. I stopped breathing. What I saw is something that I still cannot explain after many years. I saw a woman with shoulder-length brown hair walk past the bathroom door. She was pale, and I could not see her face. She kept her head down, I assumed because she didn't want me to see what she looked like. She was walking at a fast pace, so I didn't really see too many details except for the fact that she was stark naked. Then, I heard my closet door open, then slam. At first, I thought some crazy lady had broken into my house, nude, and I didn't know what the hell to do. I gathered the little bit of courage that I could muster, carefully stepped out of the bathroom, and moved towards my closet. The doors were sliding doors, and they were still shaking a bit from the slam. I looked through the doors. They were kind of like shutters, so you could see through them. I saw the closet light flickering and empty hangers swinging. I hoped for the best and opened the door. A blast of cold air hit me. The closet light chain was swinging, and the hangers were still slightly moving, but there was nothing there. I was trying to figure out what had just happened when my bedroom door flung open with no one in sight. That was all I could handle in one day, and I noped my happy butt right out of there as fast as I could. I went outside and waited until my husband was done with the lawn. When he saw me, he started to walk towards me. He was still angry, but his demeanor changed when he saw my face. I told him what had happened. He got his keys, we left for a bit, and then talked about what I saw. He never doubted me, due to his own experiences there when he was younger, but he told me that I couldn't let it push me around, and to either ignore it or basically tell whatever it was to go away. I never saw anything again like that in the house, but strange things still happened occasionally, nothing major. A year later, we divorced and moved on. But I will never forget that experience for as long as I live. I don't know if she was attached to the property already, or if she followed one of us home. I don't know if she was even a spirit to begin with. All I do know is that she scared the hell out of me, whoever, whatever she was. Hi, I'm Jamie Markey.
And I am a mystified Michael Tatum.
Nice, I like it. Yeah.
It's all in reference to today's stuff.
Oh, yeah.
My headspace is just churning.
I bet.
With all kinds of crazy shit today because of the research I've been doing this past couple of weeks.
Yeah, I know. You've been talking about it.
I cannot wait.
First, though, thank you, Carrie, for that story.
Such a good story.
Very good. Immediately, I was like, naked lady in the closet. Yeah, we need to read that.
Yeah, that's a story that needs to be told.
Right.
Maybe she's born with it. Maybe
she's dead and naked.
It makes me think of The Shining.
Oh,
like
yeah.
The woman in the bathroom.
Right.
Freaky shit. That scene fucked me up so much when I was a kid. It still gets to me, probably, but yeah.
It makes you wonder if it had anything like that energy when you're fighting, especially in a relationship that's doomed, right? What can be attracted to that, or what can feed off of that, you know?
Yeah, it can fuel stuff. It's like, it comes to think of, when I come to think of the fact that for like 12 years, or 10 years rather, I lived in a house that there was no reason for it to be haunted. We did research on it, and there was nothing that we could find that had ever happened there that would suggest, there was no tragic, the most tragic thing to happen to that house was me and my partner. And and yet, but shit happened, weird shit,
right.
And it would come and go in little waves. Like a couple years would pass, nothing, and then there'd be like several months where like we'd both had experiences, and it was usually when we were in the middle of a big fight.
Yeah,
you know, of some kind, like one of those week-long fights where like somebody said something on Sunday and it's Wednesday and you're still not talking.
Yeah, right.
And in that interval, shit would happen. Right.
You know what? And that. Similar stuff around, because I was married when I was in my early 20s, and when I got divorced, you know, there was a weird energy there too, that whenever we would fight, weird stuff would happen as well. But I always just thought it was him. I was like, something is clearly attached to him, and I have to get out. And I did.
Sorry, Your Honor, we're divorcing for irreconcilable differences. He's haunted. He's haunted.
There is a shadow person attached to him, and I cannot.
Yeah. He has a double life.
Yeah.
He's seeing someone else that I can't see.
Family curse. I don't know. But it's getting personal now. Yeah, I don't know what it is, but...
But yeah, that was a great submission. I love it.
Thank you, Carrie.
It's a good intro to today's episode, which is entitled what? Thief of Time.
A Thief of Time, yes.
A Thief of Time.
A Thief of Time? That sounds right.
Yeah, and that comes from, that's the title of a book by Tony Hillerman, a famous author who's written just a boatload of detective stories that take place on Navajo land. There's a lot of Native American lore woven into his stories. And so it seemed great because today we're going to be talking about some stories where Native American folklore has a role to play.
It does.
A rather significant one. But you're going to kick off things with
some of the folklore.
Some folklore.
Yes, and we've had some people asking for this. So this is our first leap into cryptids. So these are just some cryptids. A lot of them people know, but just so that we're on the same page.
Just to set the tone.
Just to set the tone, right.
Because this is the story I'm going to do today, which is going to kind of be the body of the episode, literally is like a kitchen sink situation where every fucking possible thing that could happen, everything in the paranormal literature, like, is covered in this spot.
One spot. So first we have in our cryptids the Sasquatch.
The Squatch. Bigfoot.
Yeti. All of those.
The abdominal snowman.
It's mostly Bigfoot and Sasquatch. Yeti is different.
Thing.
And it's in a different region as well. So I haven't gotten into the Yeti. But Sasquatch, okay, in North American folklore, Bigfoot or Sasquatch are said to be hairy, upright, walking, ape-like creatures that dwell in the wilderness and, most importantly, leave footprints. It's a big deal.
It's kind of where they get their
footprints. Bigfoot, right?
Bigfoot.
They are strongly associated with the Pacific Northwest, particularly Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia. And 1/3 of all reports, like all sightings, come from that region.
Yeah.
However, individuals claim to see the creatures all across North America. Over the years, these creatures have inspired numerous commercial ventures and hoaxes. The plural nouns Bigfoots and Big Feet are both acceptable.
Oh, it's like octopi and octopuses.
Yeah, but not. Yeah, so Bigfoot or Big Feet. Bigfoots or Big Feet.
Bigfoots. Okay.
Yeah,
it never.
acceptable.
It's one of those things that neither seems right.
Right, because they're
When you say
usually
it out
just
loud,
one.
It's like the name. It's like the planet. Is it Uranus or Uranus? Neither
Right.
seems.
It doesn't seem right.
Neither seems acceptable.
But I think it's because they're mostly seen singularly. You don't see like a herd of big feet.
That's true.
It's just one Bigfoot. So
one big foot.
yeah, Bigfoot footprints.
You have to love English.
You do. Folklorists trace the figure of Bigfoot to a combination of factors and sources, including folklore surrounding the European wild man figure, folk belief among Native Americans and loggers, and a cultural increase in environmental concerns. A majority of mainstream scientists have historically discounted the existence of Bigfoot, considering it to be a combination of folklore, misidentification, and hoax rather than living animals. A minority, though, have expressed belief in the creature's existence. People who claim to have seen it describe Bigfoot as large, muscular, bipedal, ape-like creatures, roughly 6 to 9 feet tall.
That's fucking massive.
For our metric people, it's 1.8 to 2.7 meters. Covered in hair, described as black, dark brown, or dark reddish. Ginger foot. Yeah. The enormous footprints for which the creature are named are claimed to be as large as 24 inches or 60 centimeters long and 8 inches or 20 centimeters wide. Some footprint casts have also contained claw marks, making it likely, though, that they came from known animals such as bears, which have 5 toes and claws. So that is Sasquatch.
Yeah, and we'll be revisiting this.
Good.
Again.
There's
soon.
the Chupacabra.
Chupacabra.
Okay, the Chupacabra or Chupacabras. Chupacabra.
It's a fun word to say.
It is. It's literally goat sucker. From chupar to suck and cabra, goat, is a legendary creature in the folklore. It's Spanish, by the way. That's what that comes from, for those who didn't know.
The more you know.
It's in the folklore of parts of the Americas, with its first reported sightings reported in Puerto Rico.
Oh, I didn't know that sightings were in the United States.
Yeah. The name comes from the animal's reported habit of attacking and drinking the blood of livestock, including goats.
Of course, goats.
Physical descriptions of the creature vary. It is purportedly a heavy creature, the size of a small bear, with a row of spines reaching from the neck to the base of the tail. Eyewitness sightings have been claimed in Puerto Rico and have since been reported as far north as Maine and as far south as Chile, and even being spotted outside the Americas in countries like Russia and the Philippines, but many of the reports have been disregarded as uncorroborated or lacking evidence. Sightings in northern Mexico and the southern United States have been verified as canids afflicted by mange. According to biologists and wildlife management officials, the Chupacabra is an urban legend.
Don't you love how, like, there seems to be, like, just teams of people dedicated to telling people who live in the country and who would know a mangy dog when they see one, like, oh, you just don't know what a dog is.
Every time I see a picture of one, though, it's like, that's a dog with mange. Every time I see a picture that's evidence, every time, I'm like...
I think most of the pictures probably come from city folk.
Okay, because they look like dogs.
That's my thing. I mean, I have no idea, but, you know, do mangy dogs suck the blood out of goats?
Hold up.
Okay. I'm going to learn something today.
The first reported attack eventually attributed to the creatures occurring in March 1995 in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, I do remember the Chupacabra thing was really recent, because I remember when I was just out of high school it started, and I'd never heard of these things before.
Yeah. 8 sheep were discovered dead, each with 3 puncture wounds in the chest area and completely drained of blood. A few months later, in August, an eyewitness, Madeline Tolentino, reported seeing the creature in the Puerto Rican town of Canovanas, when as many as 150 farm animals and pets were reportedly killed. In 1975, a similar killing in the small town of Mocha were attributed to El Vampiro de Mocha, the vampire of Mocha. Initially, it was suspected that the killings were committed by a satanic cult. Later, more killings were reported around the island, and many farms reported loss of animal life. Each of the animals was reported to have had its body bled dry through a series of small circular incisions. Puerto Rican comedian and entrepreneur Silvero Perez is credited with coining the term chupacabras soon after the first incidents were reported in the press. Shortly after the first reported incidents in Puerto Rico, other animal deaths were reported in other countries such as the Dominican Republic, Argentina, Bolivia, Chile, Colombia, Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Panama, Peru, Brazil, United States, and Mexico.
Every fucking where.
Yeah.
Damn.
South America, a lot.
And isn't that funny that it started with a joke? Like a comedian makes a joke. Let's call it the goat sucker.
Right.
That's kind of what happened with the Mothman. Some reporter was like, "Oh, that's hysterical. Let's call it the Mothman because it sounds like Batman."
And then here we are. Okay, so a 5-year investigation by Benjamin Radford, documented in his 2011 book, Tracking the Chupacabra, concluded that description given by original eyewitnesses in Puerto Rico was based on the creature Syl in the 1995 science fiction horror film Species. The alien creature Syl is nearly identical to the eyewitness, Tolentino, the woman that described it. It's nearly identical to her account, and she had seen the movie before her report. It was a creature that looked like a chupacabra with spines on its back and all. The resemblance to the chupacabra was really impressive, Tolentino reported. Radford revealed that Tolentino believed that the creatures and events she saw in Species were happening in reality in Puerto Rico at the time. And therefore concluded that the most important chupacabra description cannot be trusted. This, Radford believes, seriously undermines the credibility of the chupacabra as a real animal. In addition, the reports of blood sucking by the chupacabra were never confirmed by a necropsy. Necropsy?
I think it's necropsy, yeah.
Okay. I have to sneeze. Okay.
Think of a fish. Does that help?
Yeah, it's gone. The only way to conclude that the animal was drained of blood is the necropsy thing. An analysis by a veterinarian of 300 reported victims of the chupacabra found that they had not been bled dry. Radford divided the chupacabra reports. Oh, there it is.
There it is.
Oh, God.
Your sneeze is the least frightening thing in the world.
Oh, it was getting to me.
It's
okay.
like Tinkerbell.
Excuse me. Glitter just went everywhere.
Every time you sneeze, a fairy gets its wings.
That's right. Okay, where was I?
So
Radford, they weren't bled
they
dry.
weren't
300
dry.
ones that were claimed were not actually bled all the way dry.
Oh, they did have blood missing.
Yes. Okay. So Radford divided the chupacabra reports into two categories. The reports from Puerto Rico and Latin America where animals were attacked and it is supposed their blood was extracted, and the reports from the United States of mammals, mostly dogs and coyotes with mange, that people called chupacabra due to their unusual appearance. In late October 2010, University of Michigan biologist Barry O'Connor concluded that all chupacabra reports in the United States were simply coyotes infected with the parasite Sarcoptes scabiei, so like a scabies type thing, whose symptoms would explain most of the features of the chupacabra. They would be left with little fur, thickened skin, and a rank odor. O'Connor theorized that the attacks on goats occurred because these animals are greatly weakened. They're going to have a hard time hunting, so they may be forced into attacking livestock because it's easier than running down a rabbit or a deer. Although several witnesses came to the conclusion that the attacks could not be the work of dogs or coyotes because they had not eaten the victim, this conclusion is incorrect. Both dogs and coyotes can kill and not consume the prey, either because they are inexperienced or due to an injury or difficulty in killing the prey. The prey can survive the attack and die afterwards from internal bleeding or circulatory shock. The presence of 2 holes in the neck corresponding with the canine teeth are to be expected since this is the only way that most land carnivores have to catch their prey. I will say, though, A lot of the reports have 3 punctures, but that could be, and this is graphic, but when you take a bite and kind of if the animal moves, like maybe one tooth is in and then it punctures again.
I mean, there are a lot
like
of
it's
teeth
reasonable.
in a dog's mouth, so it's possible that a third puncture wound could be created by a neighboring tooth.
Yeah.
You know, because the animal's not just going to stand there and take it. You're right. So that makes sense.
Yeah. There are reports of stray Mexican hairless dogs also being mistaken for chupacabras. The most common description of the chupacabra is that of a reptile-like creature said to have leathery or scaly greenish-gray skin and sharp spines or quills running down its back. It is said to be approximately 3 to 4 feet high, 0.9 to 1.2 meters, and stands and hops in a fashion similar to that of a kangaroo, which I didn't realize that. Another common description of the chupacabra is of a strange breed of wild dog. This form is mostly hairless and has a pronounced spinal ridge, unusually pronounced eye sockets, fangs, and claws. Unlike conventional predators, the chupacabra is said to drain all of the animal's blood and sometimes organs, usually through 3 holes in the shape of a downwards pointing triangle or through 1 or 2 holes.
Interesting.
Yeah, I find chupacabras very hard to believe in.
Yeah, so much for them. I think it's interesting. Now, we will get in the speaking of like the livestock, and we will get into some cattle mutilation when I get to my story.
Sounds super exciting.
It gets pretty graphic, and I will say, having done the research that I've done on that story, sometimes, especially when it comes to like the more bizarre cases, and there are some genuinely bizarre cases of cattle mutilation that are like, the scavenger didn't do this, a fucking predator didn't do this, a person didn't do this. This is not. I mean, this is fucked up. When it happens, there's a lot of vets won't touch it. They don't because they have this whole thing of like, I can't explain how this creature died, and that's when this whole craze started, because it started, everyone like, oh, it's UFOs, it's a satanic cult, it's a chupacabra, it's whatever. They wanted nothing to do with that because it hurts their business. They're like, no, I'm just here to help you fucking, cure your calves of foot and mouth disease or whatever.
Right.
And when that kind of shit happens, it's like, it's
I'm
crazy.
just cleaning hooves.
And so sometimes the scientific community will jump to conclusions because they don't have an answer.
Right.
Now, it sounds like they had a pretty good answer for chupacabra, but there are we will get into a lot of quote-unquote rational explanations for cattle mutilations that just do not fucking hold
Makes
water.
sense. Yeah.
When you look at the facts.
All right. Well, and see, here's the thing, is I'm not opposed to believing something else.
Right.
I just find the chupacabra itself difficult.
Well, it's also worth noting, I think the lesson there that I don't necessarily think the chupacabra is real either, but if the rational explanation is to be believed, the lesson there is that people do experience things. It's not just a mass hallucination or people going whatever. They're just like, oh, there's this fucking, breed of dog going around with this kind of mange that we've never seen before. So they are seeing something, and something is happening. They're just maybe giving it a spin, a little extra something because they saw the movie Species.
Right, exactly.
So it's interesting how the mind works.
There's also...
Not fake. It's not fake. It's just a misinterpretation.
That's right. Interesting.
Worth bearing in mind. So people aren't unreliable. They're just not as informed.
Yeah.
Always.
There are also Thunderbirds.
Thunderbirds!
It is not a 90s car from a metal band's video. Or an 80s car, I guess.
80s, 90s, whatever.
Hairband. And some girls like crawling on it in a bikini. That's not what we're talking about. Although that would be fucking hilarious.
And her name is Mercedes, weirdly.
Right. Yeah, exactly. What?
It's a little car-on-car action. It's a Snap-on Tools calendar. That's what it is.
It's just never an effective way to wash a car the way they wash cars.
It really isn't.
No. Okay, so Thunderbirds.
He's wash it naked. It's like that vine. I'm washing me and my car.
We know, you can drive through a car wash. It's pretty easy. It's like...
I wouldn't recommend walking through a car wash naked.
That's true.
Yeah, you're going to come out with some mysterious marks.
That's weird. Accurate. Okay, the original depiction of the Thunderbird were described, the depictions of the Thunderbird were described as some sort of hybrid reptilian bird, though in later description, the creature becomes more bird-like. Okay, it starts. It doesn't start, but this is a notable a notable,
Notable sighting.
sighting.
Okay.
Like a white person sees it for the first time. That's really where this is.
That's when people seem to start taking it seriously, which is so weird. But it's yeah.
A mother whose 56-pound son had been allegedly carried 35 feet before dropping him described the Thunderbird as follows. It had a white ring around its half-foot long neck. The rest of the body was very black. The bird's bill was 6 inches in length and hooked at the end. The claws on the feet were arranged with 3 front, 1 in the back. Each wing, less the body, was 4 feet at the very least. The entire length of the bird's body, from beak to tail feather, was approximately 4.5 feet.
That's big.
It's big.
That's really fucking big.
Yeah, so with the body...
Up her son?
It picked up her son, who was 56 pounds, and carried him 35 feet. He was in shock. She went mama mode, raged at the bird. It dropped him and flew away. There were a couple of them, too. There were 2 of them. This makes me
think of a Charles Addams comic that came out in the New Yorker in, like, the 50s. It's a woman running on a beach in the shadow of a giant bird, and in the shadow you can see a man in its claws, and she's shouting up, "Harold, drop the keys!"
Yeah, right.
It's really funny.
I know that one. I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Okay. There may have been a shred of truth to the mother's story, and this is where it gets complex. Legends abound in Illinois about mysterious giant birds dating all the way back to the Cahokia tribe, an advanced and largely urbanized chiefdom on the banks of the Mississippi River that petered out around the 13th century. The cosmology of the Cahokia tribe is filled with fantastic creatures. Motifs of serpents, dragons, and monstrous birds dot the cliffs around the former Cahokia heartland, serving a religious purpose and also warning strangers and potential foes that they were entering Cahokia territory. If I am butchering that name, I am very sorry. I apologize. The Cahokia tribe calls these birds thunderbirds for the sound they make when they flap their giant wings. Considered to be highly intelligent, these creatures alternated between preying on and assisting the tribe whenever they pleased. The thunderbirds figure prominently in the legends of other plain tribes as well, including the Lakota, who believe that the birds embody the supreme being that created all living things on Earth. So, that creator was trying to take your baby. Theoretically, these birds could have been an errant condor. These giant birds have wingspans in excess of 10 feet, though the species is endangered and endemic to the West Coast. So that is a thunderbird.
Thunderbirds are fascinating.
It's crazy.
They really are.
Yeah. Will-o'-the-wisp.
Yes.
I don't know why. These are kind of my favorites.
Yeah?
I don't know why.
Do you know that's where the term jack-o'-lantern comes from?
I may have known that.
Oh, I don't know. Sorry.
It seems likely that... No. I'm literally saying I may have known that. It sounds familiar.
Same thing. Will of the wisp, Jack of the lantern. It's kind of a variation on that.
I'm going to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah? Oh, good.
Sort of where it came from and stuff. Okay, in folklore, the will-o'-the-wisp, will-o'-wisp, or Ignis fatuus. Yeah.
That one never caught on. It was just too hard to pronounce.
Yeah. It's medieval Latin for fool's fire. It's an atmospheric ghost light seen by travelers at night, especially over bogs, swamps, and marshes. The phenomenon is known in English folk belief, in English folklore, and much of European folklore by a variety of names, including jack-o'-lantern. This is why I knew that, because I read it. I was like, sounds familiar. I may have read that recently. Okay, yeah, jack-o'-lantern, friar's lantern, hinky puck. Hinky punk. Hinky punk and hobby lantern.
Hinky punk sounds like a really cool club scene in somewhere in Europe, like in Estonia. It's like Estonia punk rock.
Yeah, and they have really cool lighting. And
like
that's what they call it, hinky punk.
The best lighting.
Right. It is said to mislead travelers by resembling a flickering lamp or lantern. In literature, will-o'-the-wisp sometimes have metaphorical meaning, e.g. describing a hope or a goal that leads one on, but is impossible to reach, or something one finds sinister and confounding. Will-o'-the-wisp appear in folk tales and traditional legends of numerous countries and cultures. Notably, will-o'-the-wisp include St. Louis Light in Saskatchewan, Marfa Lights of Texas, shout out, the Naga fireballs on the Mekong in Thailand, and the Hesdalen Light in Norway. Hesdalen Light?
Oh, Hesdalen. Yeah,
Hesdalen Light in Norway. While urban legends, folklore, and superstition typically attribute the will-o'-the-wisps to ghosts, fairies, or elemental spirits, modern science often explains them as natural phenomena such as bioluminescence or chemiluminescence caused by the oxidation of phosphine, diphosphane, and methane produced by organic decay.
So they're basically farts.
Kind of.
Farts that like nature is just lit on fire.
Kind of. That's what science says.
I bet it's when a dog covered in mange lights its fart on fire.
Why not? Well, and it's fanned by the flames of the Thunderbird's wings.
And Bigfoot comes along and is like, only you can prevent forest fires.
That's right. And then he puts his foot in the middle of the fire spot, and that's how we get it all.
Oh my God, this is all connected. I think we
There's a conspiracy.
I think we just solved it.
I think we did. All right. All right. A little bit more. Okay. So the term will-o'-the-wisp comes from wisp, a bundle of sticks or paper sometimes used as a torch, and the name will, thus meaning will of the torch. The term jack-o'-lantern, jack of the lantern, originally referred to a will-o'-the-wisp. In the United States, they are often called spook lights, ghost lights, or orbs by folklorists and paranormal enthusiasts. Folk belief attributed the phenomenon to fairies or elemental spirits explicitly in the term hobby lanterns found in the 19th century Denham tracts. In her book, A Dictionary of Fairies, K.M. Briggs provides an extensive list of other names for the same phenomenon, though the place where they are observed, graveyard, bogs, etc., influences the naming considerably. When observed in graveyards, they are known as ghost candles, also a term from the Denham tracts. The names will-o'-the-wisp and jack-o'-lantern are explained in etiological folk tales recorded in many variant forms. In Ireland, Scotland, England, Wales, Appalachia, and Newfoundland, in these tales, protagonists named either Will or Jack are doomed to haunt the marshes with a light for some misdeed. One version from Shropshire. Yeah.
Shropshire. I think Shropshire.
Shropshire. It sounds right. In that it sounds wrong. So that must be right. One version from Shropshire is recounted by Briggs in A Dictionary of Fairies and refers to Will the Smith. Will is a wicked blacksmith who is given a second chance by St. Peter at the gates of heaven, but leads such a bad life that he ends up being doomed to wander the earth. The devil provides him with a single burning coal with which to warm himself, which he then uses to lure foolish travelers into the marshes. And I enjoyed that because it's Will Smith.
Yeah, it makes me think of and then the devil condemns him to bad CGI in Aladdin.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't be.
We haven't seen the movie yet.
We haven't. Well, no, we haven't. But he was also in Men in Black, which also kind of they're their own folklore thing, which we could do a whole episode on them. But
I
won't because I don't want
Men in
them to
Black and the Children of the Black Eyes, and all that stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So we'll be introducing some more cryptids here and there.
Well, this is the first story I think we'll have done where UFOs play a role.
Yes, I think so too.
Yeah, because I think, it's fascinating, and it's too fascinating to leave alone. And so much other shit happened here on this place that it's so crazy.
So fucking excited now.
So my story,
yes, that goes along
is
with
on the Skinwalker Ranch.
Woo!
Of Utah. Now, I want to give a special shout out to the last podcast on the left who've done a multi-parter on this. It's really fucking good. There's also a YouTuber called Bedtime Stories that did a great little two-parter on it, which I found really good. The artwork in that is awesome.
Nice.
And also the book Hunt for the Skinwalker by Colm Keller. Colm Keheller. It's an Irish name.
Colm Keheller
and George Knapp. And
class.
the UFO Utah display by biologist Dr. Frank B. Salisbury. Right. So,
All right.
I have a sip of my drink. Settle in,
I'm
because this
ready.
shit's going to blow your mind. Do you know
super
anything
excited.
about the Skinwalker Ranch?
I know that it has nothing to do with Skywalker Ranch.
Nothing. At
Right.
all.
In my mind, I wanted it to be like this is what I wanted it to be whenever I heard about it, because I didn't really know anything about it. I wanted it to be like a creature, you know how they'll do Face Off, where they design. Yeah. I felt like it was a space like Skywalker Ranch, but it was for makeup and creature development like that.
Oh, that'd be really great.
Right.
I think when I first heard the name Skinwalker Ranch, I immediately thought of one of those really dodgy looking strip clubs you see on the side of the highway in in the middle of nowhere, where you realize there's probably 1,000 people in there right now, because this is the only strip joint for 100 square miles.
Right.
And but it's
at
not.
least half of the dancers are pregnant. No shame to dancers.
You gotta do what you gotta do.
You gotta do what you gotta do. But
And that takes talent to dance while you're pregnant. It really does. You gotta.
It takes talent to do anything while you're pregnant.
That's true. It takes talent to pee when you're pregnant. Or not to pee.
Or not to
as
pee.
the case may be.
I think the peeing part might be the
pee
easiest.
Or not to pee. That is the question. Anyway, so strap in. This is going to be a long and detailed story, and if you don't gasp at least a dozen times, I will not have done my job.
There's one.
Oh, fuck. That's just, you can't just give them to me.
Okay, all right. Sorry. That was
Unless you were
practice.
gasping at the challenge.
All right.
So we begin with northern Utah's Uinta Basin. It's easily one of the most remote and beautiful regions of the country. It's part of the larger Colorado Plateaus province, east of the Wasatch Mountains and south of the Uinta Mountains, which form the basin's northern border. It's also home of Kings Peak, the highest point in Utah, rising at just about 13,528 feet above sea level. The breathtaking 75 square mile area also happens to be one of the most active paranormal hotspots on the fucking planet.
I'm excited.
While
Also,
roughly...
Utah is gorgeous.
It really is.
Like, all of it.
When I was looking at pictures of this place,
That
I
I've
want to
seen.
visit just to take postcards, but this place is also terrifying. Now, while roughly...
I want to visit it for 4 hours and then leave.
Not even that long.
4 minutes and then leave.
I want to go to another state and just have my drone fly over.
And never come back.
And never, ever, ever. And I'm not the only one that feels that way. So while roughly 12,000 years worth of Native American oral tradition bears compelling witness to the high strangeness of the region, recorded UFO sightings date back to the 18th century. In 1776.
Does a what count as a gasp?
Right?
Does it?
Huh?
I said, what? Does that count as a gasp? All right, one. We're at one.
In 1776, the first Europeans in the region, a pair of Franciscan monks scouting out a road between Santa Fe and Monterey, witnessed a churning ball of fire blaze across the night sky above their camp in El Rey and recorded it in their journals, diaries, whatever you call what monks write in.
Papers.
There is so much bizarre shit that has happened over the centuries in this area that I barely even have time to scratch the surface. But among some of the high weirdness, before we even get to the Skinwalker Ranch, to give you an idea, strange lights have adorned the stunning night sky for centuries. The local Ute tribe has a housing development that is rumored to be built on a cemetery originally established for black Freemasons, known as the Buffalo Warriors, that fought during the Civil War. I highly recommend you look them up. They were just too fascinating to even get into here because it would take me down another rabbit hole. Giant aquatic serpents supposedly haunt a nearby reservoir known as Bottle Hollow.
Haunted by aquatic serpents?
Off the record, tribal police will tell you these creatures dragged at least one unfortunate victim to a watery doom as recently as the 80s.
Whoa.
Now, the reservoir abuts a 488-acre plot of land smack dab in the middle of the Uinta Basin that the Ute forbid their people to walk on, believing it to be, quote, in the path of the Skinwalker. And they hold hard and fast to that rule. They do not fucking truck with that area at motherfucking all. Into the side of a geological feature bordering the property is inscribed a discreet Masonic insignia at least 100
Oh, you got
years
another one.
old.
You got a gasp. There's two.
Yes. Carved in such a way that the artists must have suspended themselves from the rim in a way not yet understood. The ridge itself is known as Skinwalker Ridge. Now, you may be asking, what exactly is a Skinwalker? Well, whatever else you've heard, they are bad fucking news. In Navajo culture, They're essentially a kind of rogue shaman or witch with the ability to transform into any animal they please, among other things. And their intentions are never good. At best, they use their powers for purely selfish ends. At worst, they absolutely get their kicks by sowing death and destruction.
It's like a magical Ronin.
Maybe. Sure.
Isn't that what a Ronin is? It's a samurai that...
It's a samurai that doesn't have a master anymore.
Right, so
they just kind of roam and...
Yeah, so it's like that, but magical and dark.
Very dark.
Okay.
Very, very dark. On the rare occasions when Navajo will even speak about them to outsiders, they are referred to in hushed tones as creatures of pure, concentrated evil, and the Navajo don't like to speak of them very often because even to talk about them is to, like, get their attention, and the last fucking thing you want is to be on a Skinwalker's to-do list.
Seems appropriate.
According to legend, the means by which they obtain their terrifying powers involve, among other things, sacrificing a loved one in cold blood and having sex with the corpse. For starters.
What? No, wait. What is that?
That's
just a thing they do?
That's a thing. That's apparently that the legend is that Skinwalkers are initiated into the craft that way. So right out the gate, they are...
Somebody who would be willing to do that.
Yeah. Now, that's according to Navajo legend. A lot of this, and again, the Navajo are very cagey about that. They don't like to talk about them. They don't like it. Tony Hillerman, who we mentioned earlier, the author who's written about, he's lived among the Navajo he's a Caucasian man, I believe he's Caucasian, that has lived among the Navajo for decades, and he has used the Skinwalker trope and stories about Skinwalkers in his detective fiction, and has gotten some flack from the culture because they're like, and on the one hand, some people within the culture are like, don't be saying that shit. We look stupid when you say that. And others are like, don't be talking about that shit because these things are real. And no, we don't want to.
Right. You're not supposed to talk about Fight Club.
Yes.
Got it.
Basically.
Okay.
It's like a big black magic fight club. They're supposed to live in a place not far from Skinwalker Ranch called the Dark Canyon, and the Ute are forbidden to go there too.
It's just a terrible sounding name.
Just to go there, you have to talk to the Ute. If you are a member of the tribe, you have to get clearance from the tribal elders to go, and they never grant it.
Well, why would you have to go to the Dark Canyon? What reason do you have?
Exactly, right? Just fucking leave it be. Let them do their thing.
Well, and it's interesting too, because we just talked about the Oregon Trail last time. That the trail led to this area.
Yes.
And it had not been, only the Native Americans were living there at the time, and it's interesting that they had particular rules about the things that were there. And
you don't mess with shit. You don't mess with shit. And they're like, here come all these fucking white dudes just gonna be like, what's this? It's like having someone in your home. It's like having children in your home, like that's nice, and you've got nice shit everywhere, and the kids are just gonna pick everything up and drop it, and they're like,
push all the buttons.
God damn it, this is fucking white people. Yeah. Now, Skinwalkers are not thought to bother non-Native Americans, but in recent times, some stories suggest that they're expanding their portfolio. In 1983, a Caucasian family driving in Arizona along Route 183 through a massive Navajo reservation was suddenly struck by the certainty that something unseen was following their car. As they rounded the bend, the atmosphere palpably changed. Time seemed to stand still. All at once, a massive humanoid figure covered in black fur and, astonishingly, wearing men's clothing, jumped out at them from a ditch at the side of the road. Its eyes, they said, burned yellow. Now, a few nights later, the family awoke to the sound of drumming outside their Flagstaff home. 3 figures, vaguely humanoid, were standing at the fence, which for some reason they seemed unable to climb over. After several failed attempts, these creatures, whatever they were, formed a circle and began chanting for about an hour before they finally skulked off into the night, never to be seen again. Now, how does all this figure into the Skinwalker Ranch?
Well, hold on real quick. I just want to stop for a minute.
There's a lot. There's a lot to take in, and we haven't even gotten to...
just want... the visual of these 3 terrifying creatures after this terrible thing, and there are 3 of them, and they're humanoid, and it's terrifying, and they're coming, and then they just can't climb over the fence.
Well, the family talked to someone on the reservation about what the fuck was going on,
Yeah.
and they were told by a shaman that, like, they're after you, but there's something protecting your home, and that's why they couldn't get in, and so they just gave up.
I just enjoy it turning into the Three Stooges of terrifying and not being able to get on.
It's just like, I don't know, like, it's terrifying. Like, thank God.
It's terrifying,
good.
but
Like,
very amusing.
Whatever, that's like the best brand of fencing ever. They're like,
Right.
you know,
Yes.
keep out evil spirits with DuPont. Whatever.
Right, yeah.
It's so. Anyway, so some members of the Ute tribe trace all the trouble on the Skinwalker Ranch back by about 15 generations. In the early 19th century, the Utes, described by historians as a fierce and warlike people, frequently teamed up with the Navajo against common enemies. Now, they didn't always get along, but they were willing to work together if it suited both their purposes. After acquiring horses from the Spanish, however, they turned on their former allies with a vengeance, raiding their camps and selling prisoners into the thriving New Mexican slave market. During the Civil War, the Ute took orders from Kit Carson in a military campaign against the Navajo. In 1878, hundreds of Navajo perished in a forced march from their lands under U.S. bayonets. Driven to a remote and inhospitable land, the Navajo blamed their misery on the tribe's preponderance of witches and began executing wholesale anyone suspected of sorcery.
That's far.
One such victim of this purge was gutted and stuffed with protective talismans wrapped in a broken treaty. And this is true.
What?
The remains were found in a grave, and there's like rocks and fucking sage and shit inside their stomach, wrapped in a fucking broken treaty with the U.S. government. It's around this time the Utes believe the Navajo, in retribution, cursed the land on which the ranch now sits. And maybe not the Navajo, but the witches within the Navajo that were just sick of everything.
Yeah.
At least that's what some of the Ute believe.
The Ute believe it. So it's not like a white person is just being like, oh, they must have cursed it. So now everything's even.
Yeah, well, there's such a huge Mormon population in Utah that a lot of them don't really. Are you keeping a running tally?
Yes,
of the
you said
guests? Okay,
12.
this is great. Oh my god, okay, so let's get to the ranch.
Okay.
By 1987, the elderly couple, the Myers, who'd owned the ranch since the mid-50s, had all but abandoned it, schlepping about 150 miles from Salt Lake City once or twice a year to make sure the fences were still intact. In 1994, a high-end cattle breeder from New Mexico named Tom Gorman and his wife Ellen, these are pseudonyms, they do not like being known by their names, and haven't for years.
Do they still live there?
No.
No, okay.
And his wife Ellen purchased it for a song. The contract had several bizarre clauses, including one that prohibited digging on the property without express consent from the Myers. Now, to be fair, there is some confusion on that point. The Myers maintained that they don't remember much happening in their time on the ranch, and it's quite feasible that the whole no digging thing had to do with mineral rights, which probably still belonged to them at the time.
Right, of course.
Either way, when Tom and Ellen first set up in the homestead, the old homestead that had been there forever, they found it dilapidated. There were deadbolts on every door, inside and out. Interior doors and outside doors, both sides of the doors all had deadbolts. There were dog pens, like guard dog pens, in several places around the house. There were chain, brackets or whatever, shackles, whatever you call them, clearly there to chain up powerful dogs. And Tom Gorman recalls it looking like the place was prepared to wait out a fucking siege.
Wow.
And he was really weirded out by that.
Maybe
now,
that was the zombie apocalypse place.
Well, so the first really weird thing that happened to them was the wolf. Now, while tending to a cattle enclosure one afternoon shortly after moving in, Tom and his son, Tad, also a pseudonym, noticed a wolf loping toward them from the far side of the south pasture. As it stalked closer, Tom, a trained marksman with a keen eye for distances, could plainly make out that this gray-pelted creature was at least 3 times the size of an average wolf.
Like a dire wolf.
Exactly. And a dire wolf, that was a real thing.
Oh, yeah.
They were a real species. They went extinct about 10,000 years ago. And that's what it looked like. When it came up to them at one point, Tom was over 6 feet tall. Like, this thing was standing on all fours. When it was near him, it came up to his fucking shoulder.
Wow.
That's how big this fucking thing is.
Wow.
it's the creature seemed nonchalant as it came up to them, even friendly, wagging its tail as it approached, regarding them with ice blue eyes that, quote, penetrated the soul. And with such zen-like calm did the animal regard them that even when 50 feet away, neither Tom, Tad, or Ellen, who by now had joined them with their daughter Kate to see what all the fuss was about, felt the slightest pang of fear. The same couldn't be said of the cattle. Recoiling toward the opposite end of the pen, however, they seemed fearful of the creature and the wet, musky odor that came with it. One calf, however, more curious than afraid, poked its head through the bars for a better look. All at once, in a flash of gray, the wolf had the poor creature's neck in its powerful, massive jaws. Tom kicked at it mercilessly, in the ribs. Unblinking, it continued to try wrenching the poor calf through the bars. Tom finally pulled out his .357 Magnum and shot the wolf point blank in the abdomen, standing no more than 2 feet away. It had no effect.
Wow.
Only after 3 shots did the wolf let go, and only after a 4th shot directly at the beast's heart did it finally back off by about 20 feet. But still, it just kind of stood there looking at them with these blue eyes like, the fuck are you doing?
Why would you? I was hungry.
And then it just sort of looked at them. So Tom ordered Tad to fetch his .30-06 from the house, and Ellen and Kate were just watching in horror like, what the fuck is going on? Tad comes back out with the gun, and Tom fires at the creature, and it blew off just a tiny piece of its shoulder. But it still took several more shots for this creature to finally just turn around in its own good time and trot off.
I guess you know when you're not wanted.
Yeah, like, okay. So it took off towards this sort of copse of Russian olive trees, of which there were several on the property. Tom and his son gave chase, determined not to let this thing roam their property unchecked, especially with all these expensive heads of cattle they were planning on moving onto the property.
Right.
After losing sight of him, they tracked the creature for half an hour. Its massive paw prints abruptly ended in the mud about 20 yards from the bank of a nearby river. The wolf was nowhere to be seen.
Wow.
And the tracks, especially when they got to the mud, like clearly at several points, the creature had sunk down in the mud by a foot or two because the ground was that soft. And yet, boom, the tracks just end. The wolf was nowhere. When Tom went back to the homestead, like just with his son shaking their heads going, we don't fucking know what happened, what this is all about. He found the piece of flesh that had torn off with one of the gunshots. And by the way, that .30-06 that he used could take down a fucking elk. And it didn't even... All it did was blow off a little piece of shoulder. And Tom was a fucking marksman. He served time in the military during Vietnam, so like he knew what he was fucking doing. And so he picked up this piece of flesh later, just a little while later when he came back to the homestead, and it looked dead. It looked necrotized, and it smelled like rot. And it had only been there for maybe an hour, right?
Ew, that's crazy.
Now, Ellen herself saw the wolf and several others like it on multiple occasions, usually while driving up to the house from the front gate. When she drove to town and demanded the Ute tribal police do something about these creatures, they met her with utter confusion. The last wolf in the region, they said, had been shot and killed in 1929. Eventually, the wolves stopped showing up, but no sooner had they made themselves scarce than Ellen became the focus of poltergeist activity.
Whoa. It makes me think of the Church Grimms, too. The large black dog thing, too, yeah.
Oh, it's fucked up. It's
well, and
so
in a Church Grimm is a dead dog, so... Interesting.
One afternoon, she put away a sizable load of groceries she'd just come back to from town with, only to find every single item taken from its proper place and stuffed back in the shopping bag she knew she'd folded and stowed beneath the kitchen sink not a few minutes before. She would step out of the shower to find her towel and hairbrush missing, though the bathroom door was locked.
Very irritating.
The brush turned up later in the freezer.
Very irritating. Doors
all over the house, inside and out, would just open, which seemed to explain the deadbolts.
Right, yeah.
So many household objects went missing or turned up in places she had no memory of leaving them that Ellen started being concerned for her mental health. Was this the onset of some kind of early dementia or Alzheimer's? She didn't know. One evening, Tom bustled in around dusk, shouting about his goddamn post hole digger. He'd set it aside for a moment to root through his truck for a pair of pliers and turned back to find the 70-pound tool completely vanished. Were the kids playing pranks on him, he wanted to know. By God, he wanted to finish the fence he was working on while there was still enough light. Ellen told him that the kids had been inside with her for several hours. They looked for the post hole digger together, to no avail. It turned up several weeks later, dangling from the top of a tree on the opposite side of the property.
What? That's crazy.
Tad and 3 friends were tasked with hauling 200-some-odd metal fencing rods stacked near the house to a back pasture. Tom noticed one afternoon that it hadn't been done, and when he brought this to Tad's attention, Tad protested vehemently and said no, he and his friends had done it. What the fuck are you talking about? Well, he once said fuck to his dad. He's like, what are you talking about? They go outside, and upon closer inspection, marks in the dirt clearly indicated that someone or something had dragged the rods back across the property and plopped them back down to where they had been next to the house, but just a few inches off.
Also very irritating.
Now, soon enough, the family started to feel like they were being watched. They'd catch fleeting shadowy figures peering in through the windows at night.
Cool. I don't like that.
Heavy footsteps would echo from the porch, then later from inside the house.
No, thank you.
Tom and Ellen awoke in terror one evening to find one such figure standing at the foot of their bed before disappearing.
Negative. Don't like that.
It all sucks. The week prior to the post-hole digger's rediscovery, Tom's young nephew had been sent to the ranch by his parents, who hoped the experience would toughen the kid up a little bit. Now, knowing that his nephew was afraid of the dark, Tom and Tad had been giving the boy an after-sundown tour of the ranch to check on the cattle when Tom noticed what appeared to be RV lights in the distance, moving along the ridge well within the fence line of his property. Now, he'd seen lights like this before and had dismissed them as unwary motorists just having taken a wrong turn off the 2-lane blacktop flanking the eastern side of his ranch. Seeing the lights now, however, he suspected poachers and was determined to chase whomever it was the fuck off. As he walked toward them...
With the kid who's anxious in the dark.
Well, he left them standing there and was like, I'm just going to go walk up and see. I mean, it's poachers on his land. This man has, many, many thousands of dollars of cattle and shit. And, you gotta hold your own. And this is especially as farm guys. Like, all right, kids, watch how a man defends his land.
Right.
So... yeah, that's my dad would have been that way. Now, as he walked toward the lights, they moved away, which was odd because how the fuck had they seen him? Did they have night vision goggles? Clearly poachers if they did. He picked up his pace. The lights did the same. Tad and his nephew followed. They chased the RV from a distance of no more than 200 yards at any given time, wondering how the hell the red taillights weren't bobbing over the uneven terrain, why there was no engine noise, and how, for the matter of that, it never faltered where they knew there to be barbed wire fencing. When at last the mysterious RV came up against a thick border of 50-foot-high Russian olive trees, Tom and the boys stood in utter shock as the taillights lifted off the ground and simply flew over it.
It sounds like that decay was really running away from them.
Against the night sky, they could see clearly this was no RV, but an oblong craft with a headlight in front and a taillight in back. And all they could do was fucking watch as it just drifted silently out of sight. Now, the winter of 95 was an especially rough one. Tom was outside all hours of the day and night trying to round up cattle that had wandered off too far in the driving snow. And this is Utah. Temperatures get down to 30, 40 below freezing.
Sounds
it's awful.
Terrible.
Now, searching on horseback for a prized Angus cow that had been missing pretty much since the day before, he found a set of hoof prints and followed them toward a thicket. He was a bit alarmed, however, to note that these tracks indicated the animal had broken into a full-on run as it got close to the thicket, like something was chasing it. Now, that's weird because there was only one set of prints. Now, he followed the prints into the thicket. They led about 20 yards into a clearing and then just ended.
Whoa.
Period. Nothing. Cow was never found. And that winter, 4 more heads of cattle disappeared exactly like that. There'd be tracks or something and fucking nothing. Now, one night, while kind of roaming furtively around the ranch, hoping to catch the livestock snatchers in the act, as Tom made his way back home, crestfallen, he did another failed attempt to get at the heart of this increasingly costly puzzle. Something caught the corner of his eye. Silhouetted against the snow, a large black mass hovered quietly above the ground about 100 yards off to his left. He ducked down and hid in the brush and watched as the object moved slowly over the air as though it were surveying his property.
Ooh.
He describes the craft as resembling a kind of snub-nosed, poorly constructed variation on the F-117 Nighthawk, only completely quiet. Colored lights danced along the ground beneath it as though projected from its hull without corresponding beams. It went along as if taking everything in, and after watching it for several minutes without moving, Tom could no longer resist the urge to shift his weight. When he did, his joints cracked, and even though he was far enough away that nothing should have been able to hear him, the colored lights blinked out, and the object turned and floated back towards him, and was about 50 yards away, and just kind of hovered there like it was watching him until finally it just went away and disappeared off to the north. Ellen saw the same thing sometime later while Tom was out of town for a couple days. It floated above her car as she approached the house one evening, and the colored lights were dancing off her hood. She ran inside and did her best to push it out of her mind. Sipping tea to calm her nerves, a little later, Ellen peered out from behind the living room curtains, only to see the bizarre RV-shaped craft parked out in the field not far from the house. Through what appeared to be windows along the side of this thing, she could make out a figure, easily over 8 feet tall, dressed head to toe in black, walking from one end to the other and sitting down at some kind of large table. She called Tom in a panic. He rushed home as soon as he could and got there the next morning to find a set of colossal footprints where she'd seen the craft. Each print was over 18 inches long.
Whoa.
Now, while with the spring rains came more cattle disappearances, only some of these would turn up later, either dead for no apparent reason or horribly mutilated. Mm-hmm. Huge chunks of tissue were carved out of the animals, but the cuts were cauterized and the wounds were free of blood. Now, I want to talk about this for a second because cattle mutilation, when an animal dies, its rumen can become inflamed. It's just it's an internal part. I don't fucking know.
It's chest area.
It's thoracic cavity.
Okay.
Can swell because of gases and bacteria producing as things break down, decomposition, whatever. And if it swells up enough, soft tissue parts are suddenly exposed that aren't normally there, and so scavengers can come, have a nibble, and which releases the gas. The body kind of deflates a little bit, and then so it kind of makes the wounds look strange. It makes it look like it makes the wounds look unnatural because they reshape as the body deflates. Right. And there'd be very little blood spillage at the time because the blood has coagulated.
Yeah.
The only argument against this being the cause of the cattle mutilation is that that effect to occur naturally, the beast has to be dead for quite some time. And Tom and Ellen and other people, as we'll see, would find these creatures dead in that state 30 minutes after they'd seen them alive.
Really?
It's fucking weird.
It's kind of like that, the flesh of that got shot off of the dog, right?
Exactly. It's like some kind of weird... super fast. Or there's just some kind of time slip goes on. And sometimes these cattle, whatever did this to them, and some cattle ended up in far worse condition within view. Like they'd be sitting there 1 second, and then like Tom would turn and go back, and the fucking thing would be dead right where he'd seen it last time standing, only now it's like missing organs and all this other shit, and it's got its colon cut out and no blood anywhere. And it's just fucked up, and it's like, and it happened, within view of where he should have been able to see whatever the fuck it was, and there was nothing. So
I would not enjoy that. Nope.
Well, he didn't, and in fact, the loss of so many cattle started putting a real financial strain on Tom and his family. And throughout 1995, the phenomenon across the board just ramped up everywhere. The mysterious lights were almost a nightly occurrence, as was poltergeist activity. Noise from some kind of heavy machinery would emanate from the ground loud enough for the neighbors to hear. Disembodied voices speaking in unknown languages would drift down mockingly from the sky, sometimes in broad fucking daylight.
Wow.
One morning, Tom awoke to find huge holes dug all over the ranch, as if with a giant cookie cutter, but no piles of dirt. So there were hundreds of pounds of dirt just fucking missing that had been taken off his property right under his fucking nose. It made no sense. Sometimes, this is crazy, herds of cattle would nervously move aside and stampede away as if to make way for some large invisible presence that they couldn't see. Water in an irrigation canal displaced as if by thrashing invisible feet. And then, oh God, this one. Okay, so once words got around about the strange shit at the Gorman Ranch, it was only a matter of time before people started showing up to catch a glimpse. Now, Tom had no time for the curious and had to shoo them off in droves. The last thing he wanted was to manage a goddamn tourist attraction. However, in a rare moment of good humor one afternoon, he let a naive young hippie meditate in his field, if only for a lark. The man pleaded and said he'd driven from out of state. Tom didn't see the harm in giving the kid a few minutes to do whatever the hell he was going to do. The harmless oddball plopped down on the dirt with his legs crossed, eyes closed, and began muttering some mantras. A few minutes into this, Tom and Tad, who'd come along for the show, caught sight of something glistening in a nearby tree. They watched, baffled, as a kind of shimmering, pixelated mass spilled from the branches and floated toward their guest, vanishing a few feet above his head. This all happened so quickly that all they could do was just stand there in silence. Suddenly, the young man, who hadn't seen it because his eyes were closed, suddenly popped open, his eyes popped open, and he started to freak the fuck out. He couldn't move. Before it was all said and done, Tom and his son had to carry the kid back to his van and see him safely off. Later that night, the movie Predator happened to be on the television. When they saw the alien appear in its high-tech camouflage, both Tom and Tad jumped out of their fucking skin saying, "That's what we fucking saw."
Oh my gosh.
One night, while Tom surveyed the ranch from a tree stump, which was one of his preferred vantage points nearest the homestead, he saw a massive orange globe materialize about a mile off, just above the horizon, not unlike the setting sun or a harvest moon. Now, getting a closer look through the scope of his rifle, Tom could swear he saw an expanse of blue sky inside of it, as though we were peering through some kind of rift into another world or time. He could even make out wisps of cloud. Now, these orange portals began appearing regularly. Both Tom, Tad, Ellen, everyone in the family, and several neighbors saw it. Sometimes they could make out blue sky on the other side. Sometimes the interior resembled more of a layered tunnel. On several occasions, a black shape would zip in or out of it at such speed not even Tom's eagle eye could tell the size. He wondered why other people in the area weren't making more of a fuss. Turns out the homestead was the only vantage point from which this phenomenon could be viewed clearly. If Tom drove toward it, the portal flattened. If he tried to see it from the side, it simply ceased to exist. The mouth of the tunnel pointed straight at the Gorman homestead.
I also don't enjoy that.
People driving by on the highway could only see a perfectly ordinary flat orange glow that would barely register if they saw even that. Now, Tom and Ellen took to keeping vigil on the porch at night in nervous anticipation of whatever might come next. One evening, looking west, Tom noticed a strange blue orb dancing in the tree line beside the horses. The glow so intense it illuminated a sizable patch of whatever happened to be near. He and Ellen watched as the orb buzzed around the head of one horse, who shook its head briefly but seemed otherwise unconcerned. Then, with astonishing speed, the orb flew toward them. It hovered about 15 feet off the ground, roughly 20 feet away, offering a clear view of itself while seeming to scrutinize them. What they described was that inside a clear, hard-shell casing about the size of a basketball swirled an incandescent mass, the most intense shade of blue they'd ever seen. Suddenly, astonishment changed to panic. Tom and Ellen began trembling uncontrollably. Ellen aimed the beam of her flashlight at the orb in something like self-defense, and as if struck, the orb spun around and darted back for the trees. Tom and Ellen went the fuck inside.
Yeah.
2 hours later, the orb returned, circling the house and peering in through the windows.
It was looking for them!
Both the interior lights and the yard light outside dimmed and brightened in proportion to the orb's proximity, until it finally went away. On another night, while keeping watch with his 3 trusty setters in the field, Tom saw a blue orb, which they had begun now referring to as the blue meanies, because if you were anywhere near it, you just started having a weird panic attack.
Yeah.
That seemed artificial. Tom referred to it as it just felt like it was just laid on you. Like, I wasn't scared. Like, they saw so much weird shit that would make them feel uneasy, but full-on panic at these things was just, he just didn't feel, it felt out of character for him.
The fact that they would be on their front porch to start with, I was like, red flag, motherfuckers.
Red flag.
But
blue
apparently,
red flag.
if it happens so often, and they weren't injured by anything personally, or then I guess it would make sense to be on your front porch. So, and then to have that's
now. So he saw one of these blue meanies kind of capering along the field while he was in it with his 3 setters. And he was, at this point, just so tired of this bullshit that his dogs, who were growling and just wanted to fucking go at this thing, he let them off. And he let them go. And they chased it, and the thing ran away from them, or flew away from them. Now, they were like, it would get low enough to the ground that it would like, they would nip at it, and but it would dodge them in this series of clearly intelligent, evasive maneuvers from the dogs. And they chased it into thicket. A lot of thickets on this land. It's Utah, right? Well, Tom had just enough time to bask in the sort of momentary victory over the forces plaguing his family for the past however many months, when out of the darkness there came 3 loud, pained yelps, followed by total silence. The dogs did not come back. After waiting for 2 hours, Tom finally went back home, determined to come back the next morning. He did, and he and his son Tad found 4 black, greasy, smoldering piles that had been the dogs in the thicket.
See, never send your dogs unless you want them to get burned.
And these were his favorite dogs, and their death was the last straw. Now, I'm going to go make another drink, and then we're going to get into the second half of the story.
What? Okay. I had to get a blanket. I was cold.
It's cold. It's cold. It's really cold. And we have to turn the air off so we can record.
I know. The air's off. It's like 25 degrees in Texas right now.
It's 34. Feels like 25 with the wind chill,
really windy.
though.
It's really, really windy. And so there's no heat on. And I'm getting the story, and I'm getting like chills from getting
getting chills
freaked
from the
out.
Inside and out.
I know. I'm like, let me get a little blanket too.
So where were we? So Tom, the dogs had died, and Tom, like by now they'd been on the ranch for about 18 months. Not even 2 years.
And then he was done.
He was fucking done.
That's right.
So by now, Tom had lost 14 head of cattle, which was several. That's a lot of money. The children were doing poorly at school.
Is a head of cattle just like a cow?
Yeah, it's 1 unit.
1 unit. Just like it sounds like. I guess it would be like heads of lettuce.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It just.
I think it's just it's the industry term. I don't know.
Because wouldn't it be easier to be like 14 cows?
Well, they're not always cows. Sometimes they're a bull. Sometimes they're a different kind. It's the most general term for livestock, I guess, is head of cattle. Because head cattle can refer, from what I understand, can refer to bulls, cows, calf.
Genji is definitely part bovine, based upon what he looks like.
Genji is absolutely livestock.
When he runs away, there is nothing but a cow butt running away from you. And
if he's running towards you, it's like you feel like a matador.
Yeah, when he's running full tilt, and Genji's a Frenchie, for those who don't know, he looks...
More bull than French, though.
Yeah. He looks like a cow in a china shop, and he will destroy everything in his path. And I love it.
He's a thick little 32-pound thing.
He's so cute.
So frightened was the family that they took to huddling together in the same room at night. The Gormans were at their wits' end. Now, a local newspaper published a gossip piece about the ranch, much to Tom's chagrin.
How's everybody finding out about this shit?
It's fucking Utah. Word gets around, come to town. And what was going on at the Gorman Ranch, like, shit had been going on there for generations. Right. And they're just finding out because they came from New Mexico. And so they're like, how are things going on? And Tom would go and talk to neighbors, like, have you had shit happen? So word gets out.
Right. I guess they probably have ranch hands and stuff like that helping.
Yeah.
Okay.
So a local newspaper published a gossip piece about the ranch, much to Tom's chagrin. He did not want publicity at all. This was just a salt of the earth dude, who was like, I just want to fucking raise cattle. And we moved. They had moved specifically to this area in Utah because they were coming from New Mexico, some small town in New Mexico that was a little too gossipy for their tastes. A small town. So they moved from a small town to an even smaller town just to get away from everything. And now it's like, fuck, we had to buy the fucking land that's haunted by whatever shit this is.
By all of the things ever.
All the things ever. And so most folks laughed off the story, especially if they weren't neighbors. But it caught the attention of billionaire Las Vegas real estate entrepreneur Robert T. Bigelow. Bigelow had invested a ton of money.
Male gigolo? Deuce Bigelow?
Maybe his dad. Bigelow had invested millions of dollars into a dedicated team of scientists who investigated claims of the paranormal, known as the National Institute for Discovery Science, or NIDS. He offered to buy the ranch. Tom, after much soul-searching, sold. Ellen and their kids moved into a smaller ranch about 25 miles away. Tom split his time between them and staying on with NIDS as the ranch manager. Now, it's worth mentioning NIDS was serious fucking business. In fact, Bigelow's ambition in assembling the team was unprecedented. It amounted to a well-funded, highly qualified group of PhD holders and ex-military from various scientific disciplines, armed to the teeth with state-of-the-art equipment and who could deploy anywhere in the country at a moment's notice to investigate shit like this. Bigelow was careful to recruit field investigators with a decidedly skeptical bent, people he could count on to prioritize rational explanations over pseudoscience. The two most senior members of the team were physicist Eric Davis and biochemist Colm Keheller. Keheller would later co-author the book Hunt for the Skinwalker with George Knapp. It's also worth noting that Tom, a salt-of-the-earth guy, scoffed at the idea of aliens or anything to do with Native American folklore. He figured the military were up to something on his land illegally and wanted NIDS to fucking out them.
So he could sue for all of the things?
Yeah. The ranch offered a wide variety of phenomenon in a remote locale ideal for research. NIDS couldn't resist. They purchased a dozen heads of cattle from Tom to use as bait and set up a field lab in September. The team consisted...
Oh, poor cows.
The team, well, they were going to get killed anyway. Might as well die for science.
Oh.
The team consisted of 4 scientists from different disciplines and a small group of assistant investigators stationed on the property 24/7. The aim was to collect evidence and present a monthly report to the rather hard-edged advisory board back in Las Vegas. The first order of business was ruling out fraud or mass delusions, which of course were very popular, or very possible as the team knew. They searched for plants that might emit spores with psychotropic properties. They tested the water supply for contamination. They surveyed the area for concentrations of electromagnetic energy and infrasound. They checked for fault lines, which can, in rare instances, create seismic stress sufficient to cause hallucinations and light anomalies. Again and again, though, when they looked for rational explanations, the team came up short. Apart from a few odd lights in the sky, though, not much really happened for the remainder of 1996. The team grew doubtful of the more bizarre claims made by Tom and his family, but that would change soon enough.
Ooh.
On March 9th, 1997,
Oh my gosh, it's almost March 9th.
Oh shit, it is. On March 9th, 1997...
Oh wait.
A calf turned up...
When we're recording it.
Yeah.
It's close to March 9th, whenever this comes out.
We're like the first week of March right now, so...
Yeah.
A calf turned up horrendously mutilated in broad daylight not 15 minutes after Tom had seen it live. His blue heeler growled and raced toward the calf's mother, who was pacing frantically back and forth. Incidentally, the blue heeler disappeared and never showed up again. Tom rushed over to find the calf dead. Its leg had been ripped off at the joint and lay 10 yards away. Its ribs were broken outward and all thoracic internal organs were just gone.
No.
The tagged ear had been cut off with surgical precision. In all, 40 pounds of meat and tissue from the 80-pound animal had vanished without a trace of blood, either on the carcass or in the grass.
Something was very hungry.
And whatever did this had done so quietly, in broad daylight, less than 100 yards from where Tom had been standing with an unobstructed view. The team's veterinarian took samples, while other members of the team scoured the area for tracks. There were none, but passing an observation deck surrounded by chain-link fencing behind which guard dogs were posted, one of several such structures the team erected once they arrived, they noticed the dogs huddled together in abject terror. These dogs were used as biosensors by the team, owing to their uncanny knack for knowing when something was up. But for several days after the calf's mysterious death, the dogs refused to leave the pen.
Whoa.
They're
like the birds. They're like the birds in the
bird box.
In the bird box, yeah.
The dog box. Now, around 11 p.m. on March 10th, the next night, the dogs began barking horribly at something lurking at the far end of the pasture that no one could see. Tom and several members of the team who'd been in the outlook post jumped into his battered old truck. As they approached the copse of cottonwood trees at the end of the pasture, the truck's powerful spotlight beam fell onto a pair of glowing orbs situated among the branches, a massive pair of eyes reflecting the light back at them.
No, thank you.
Determined not to let whatever the hell it was kill one more fucking head of cattle, Tom hit the brakes, got out of the truck, cocked his rifle, and took aim from behind the open driver's side door. Through the scope, he said he could make out a massive shape sitting in the tree.
What?
He fired. The eyes blinked out immediately, and a loud thud echoed from the base of the tree.
Ah!
Moving in closer to investigate, however, the team found fucking nothing. They spread out and waded into the tree line in a search party fashion. Tom suddenly was heard to shout, "I see him!" followed by 2 more shots. As the team rushed to his aid, they heard something large thrashing through the brush away from them, but whatever it was had disappeared entirely by the time they caught up with Tom, who insisted it looked like a fucking dog walking on its 2 hind legs. All they found were 2 large footprints 20 feet apart, both with double claw indentations.
It is the predator.
It's fucking weird, and we're not done with that thing yet. We're gonna see that thing again. One afternoon, Tom and Ellen, who'd sometimes come to the ranch to help him out, though she didn't like it,
I bet she didn't.
passed by a corral housing 4 bulls, 2 Black Angus and 2 Simmental, which are very, very expensive. They're worth like several thousand apiece.
Delicious.
They are delicious.
This does not bode well for them now.
They were on their way. Tom and Ellen were just passing by this corral, and they noted they were on the way to fix fencing. There's a lot of fucking fence fixing to be done on ranching, right?
I mean,
and
just
so they're on the way.
Growing up in the country, we had 2.5 acres. My grandparents had
90% of your
5.
time is fixing fences.
It's all fences. Yeah.
So they passed
Especially
by
with
this pen
horses and stuff like that. Yeah.
on the way to fix this fence in their truck, and Ellen made some comment about how, man, these bulls were like their prized possession, and she made some comment about how if anything ever happened to them, she would just be devastated. Which,
oh God!
Just fucking why'd you jinx us, Ellen?
Why did she say it out loud?
So about an hour
Pinch
later,
Poke, you owe me a Coke, Ellen.
Hour or 2 later, after they had finished with the fencing, they came back by the corral, and the fucking bulls were gone. But the corral was still locked. Nope. That's not cool. Frantically get out to try to find what the fuck. No, we cannot. This was like what in today's market would have been like $40,000 worth of bull that's just gone. And so they look around and they're frantic about. Finally, sometime later, they find in an abandoned trailer that was just off to one side in a field. Tom looked over in the inside of it from top, because it was open up top, and found that all 4 bulls were just standing, as though in a trance, fucking shoulder to shoulder, in this tight space. What? And the door was closed, and it had been wired shut, and had been wired shut for ages. There were cobwebs all on the inside that had not been disturbed. These bulls were just fucking sitting here.
That's
and
some ornery bullshit.
Well, and these bulls were in a trance, because they would never have been standing this close to each other in such a confined space.
Not bulls, no.
When Tom saw them, he shouted over to Ellen, and the noise roused them awake. They snapped out of it, and they started freaking out, and they busted out of the side of the trailer, which they could do. And then it took them several hours to round them up and put them back in the pen. There is no way in hell they could have gotten in that trailer by themselves, or that anyone could have put them in there, because the cobwebs and the fact that it was wired shut and rusted, it was fucking crazy. The NIDS team investigated this, because they called them over and they told them what happened. They investigated the trailer. They also did a test of the corral bars and found that they were highly fucking magnetized. What? But that the effect diminished in a few hours. It's fucking weird. And
it makes you wonder why. It seems like just to spite her.
Oh yeah, it's like almost like you like those bulls, do you?
But not in.
But they didn't kill them. Yeah, at least the bulls survived that one.
Yeah, it wasn't in a. I don't know. It wasn't in maybe a threatening way, or maybe just a fucking with you way.
It was like, welcome back, bitch. You know, you don't like it here, but you like these bulls. It's so fucking weird. That's what's one of the oddest things about all this phenomenon, is that it seems to follow a kind of trickster pattern. Like it's like almost like a poltergeist does when like they take suggestions. They're like, okay, it's like they're doing an improv show. All right, I need a place and a profession. And it's fucking weird.
An activity.
activity, right? So now later the same month, Colm Keheller was investigating bizarre tracks found on the ranch's south side when he was suddenly overcome by a musky odor completely new to him, despite by now being well acquainted with the various smells of this place. He said the hairs on the back of his neck stood up.
The hairs on the back of my neck are standing up just
and a chill ran down his spine. He could feel something watching him. Now, he dismissed it as his imagination. He was a man of science, and eventually both the smell and the feeling dissipated. But later, a partner of his that was out on the same pasture about 50 feet away from him at the time said, yeah, I felt the same fucking thing. But the damnedest thing happened. My compass went fucking haywire. And the needle started spinning, and it kept pointing in the direction that the smell seemed to be coming up. And then once the smell dissipated, it went back to normal. Now, one night in early June...
That's a stinky stink.
This is a terrifying one.
Oh, God. Okay. I'm ready.
One night in early June, Colm and Eric Davis were staking out the homestead, which, of course, was one of the most active spots on the whole property, when the dogs with them began to whine and cower at their feet. Now, Eric, who'd been scanning the tree line with night vision goggles, suddenly gasped and exclaimed, Jesus, there's something in the fucking trees over there. It's this huge black thing. Now, Colm could see nothing, but he focused his camera in that direction and began taking shot after shot, hoping to capture whatever it was on film. Eric told him it appeared to be moving somewhat north, and he couldn't tell whether it was in the trees or behind them. And all at once, he said, in a muted, terrified voice, "It's got me. It's saying, we are watching you."
Oh, my God!
He began muttering, Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ, to himself for moments on end afterwards, until finally he said the thing had moved away. He could offer no insight on what had just happened to him, aside from the fact that it felt like whatever the fuck it was had just been in his head.
No.
And was saying, we're watching you.
Oh my gosh.
And
he was like, I'm leaving now forever.
Eric had never had an experience like that before in his life, and it so rattled him that Colm noted for the rest of the week that Eric was jumpy and distracted and did not want to fucking talk about it at all.
Oh my gosh.
In fact, as my understanding, he had to be coerced into putting it in the book. He didn't. He's like, I don't want to keep my shit out there. Like, I don't want to. No. 2 months after this, in August, two team members by the name of Mike and Jim would have one of the most jarring experiences to come out of the whole thing. Around 3:30 a.m., the two men were scouting a ridge that gave a view of the homestead below. Mike scanned the landscape through infrared binoculars, while Jim was taking readings from their field instruments. They were about to move on to another spot when Mike suddenly saw a light hovering in a pasture some 150 feet below. Oddly, Jim could only see a dull orb, but through Mike's goggles, he said the light was as bright as a full moon, hovering about 3 feet off the ground. Mike shouted excitedly that the light was glowing. It's not a light at all, he said. It's a tunnel. I can see through to the other side. Jim tried to take a look, but Mike, transfixed, wouldn't relinquish the goggles for fear of missing a moment of anything. To Mike's disbelief, a huge, featureless black figure was crawling down the tunnel on its knees and elbows toward them.
No.
It then spilled out of the opening and scuttled up the ridge faster than humanly possible, racing by them at incredible speed. Both men could hear the shale crunching loudly under its feet as it ran past. It then disappeared into the darkness without a trace. Just an eerie silence followed, along with that lingering, musky odor neither man could identify. Now, for all the corroborating experiences, by mid-1998, the incidents began dropping off rather sharply. And despite the team's diligence, little in the way of definitive evidence emerged, only photos of strange lights, many of those, and a wealth of credible eyewitness testimony, both from team members, neighbors, family. One team member, retired Army Colonel John Alexander, observed in an interview much later that while it was clear some kind of precognitive sentient phenomenon was at play, the precise nature and ultimate source of that phenomenon lay wholly beyond their abilities to pin down. Eventually, the hard-edged advisory board back in Las Vegas thought it best to move on, and NIDS pulled the plug on their investigation in 2004.
What?
And everyone agrees something happened, but you can only investigate something for so long before you got nothing. Like, we have all this evidence, but of what?
Of what?
We don't know what it is.
Just
there's no way to measure it. There's no way to do anything. And this team was really, really precise. There's also, I mean, and these are just some of the more salient stories of the whole thing, because they were there for years. And if you read it in The Hunt for Skinwalker especially, they were so precise in their measurements, everything. I mean, this was a team of scientists that were trying really, really hard. They took this shit seriously, but they realized, like, it's only going to be taken seriously if we can, like, approach it like we would approach splitting the fucking atom. Like, it has to be this. We have to rule out everything it could be. And they were pretty fucking exhaustive.
Wow.
And yet, this stuff still
nothing. But it died down, and that's why they moved on.
It died down, and they moved on. Now, since then, there are reports that things still happen there. Somebody else owns the ranch now. I don't know who. But things still happen there. It's still that the Uinta Basin is still a hot spot for UFO activity. Legends of Skinwalkers still run strong, right? But for that 7-year period or so, from 1994 to, decade really, from 1994 to 2004, the ranch was real active.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
if you live at the Skinwalker Ranch
or near there,
please send us your stories.
Yes, please.
What?
So that is the Skinwalker Ranch.
That was amazing, Michael.
One of the craziest stories I think I've ever encountered.
Yeah,
where it's like everything. It's just like it doesn't.
It's nonstop.
It's almost like if this were a Hollywood movie, you'd criticize that it just didn't know its tone. Like, what are you?
Decide on what you're doing.
You're like the second season of American Horror Story. What, are you about Nazi doctors, the devil, or fucking aliens? Make up your goddamn mind.
Which is it? Yeah, because it's, gosh, who knows? That's crazy. Thank you, Michael.
You're very welcome.
That's
I hope you are now chilled sufficiently so the outside chill doesn't bother you quite so much.
Freezing and chilled. Both of these things. My nose is like an icicle. Wow, okay. Well, I guess that's it.
I know. I kind of want to go camping there now.
Well, that makes one of us.
I'll take lots of pictures and send them back to you.
Great.
No, I'm going to go camping out nearby and just let my drone go over
there. You lost me in the first 4 words.
Oh, the camping?
Yeah, I'm not going to go camping.
There's got to be some nice, like, cabins nearby with running water and electricity.
That's better.
Basically, it's basically
but
like
a home too. But then isn't a cabin in the woods?
Yeah. But because we've seen Cabin in the Woods, we know what to do.
That's true. Nothing. Don't take the bait.
Don't take the bait. Don't take the bait. Don't touch anything.
Nope.
Nope. And if we stop at a gas station on the way and someone goes, "Don't go," we'll turn the fuck around.
Great advice.
You're going to listen.
I appreciate it. And I'm going to...
Thank you. Here's a tip. Here's a couple bucks. Thank you. Go get yourself something nice.
Right, but don't go to that cabin. Oh my gosh. Okay, I guess that is all for today's episode of Ghoul Intentions.
Quite enough, I'd say.
Yeah, thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe if you have not subscribed yet.
Subscribe. It's a good thing.
Right. Please go give us our, great reviews.
Yes. We need those reviews.
We need those.
If you like us, let us know.
Yes. And you can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and our Facebook page, where we will post images. Instagram specifically will post images of some of the stuff that we talk about and keep you updated on what's going on.
Yes, go to ghoulintentions.com for links to our social media sites. To listen to previous episodes, of course. We're up to how many now?
25.
Oh my God, 25 episodes!
I know.
It's like a quarter of a century.
It is.
You can shop at our store, which is cool. Keep sending in the pictures of the shirts. We love them. Their shirts are so good. And y'all look so great in them. You really do.
It's a good shirt.
And most importantly, where you can submit your own story for consideration to be read as a cold open on a future episode. You'll find the form in the menu under Submit Your Ghost Story. It couldn't be easier. And of course, you can also email, correct?
You can email to... ghoulintentionspodcast at gmail.com. The submission thing's probably a little bit easier, and if you want to send something that's maybe not a written story, but you just wanted to communicate something to us, both of those things will work too.
You should look into this.
Yeah, because we will read stories. It's a cold open. We'll read them just as kind of conversational emails. So we get through a lot more now than we used to. So keep on sending those in. They have been wonderful.
Oh, they're so much fun to read.
Yes.
At some point, we want to use all of them if we can.
And for the record, I gasped 14 times.
Yes!
Yes.
Yes! I did my job.
Yeah.
You gasped 2 over 12. That was great. And
did.
those were genuine gasps.
They were.
I felt so validated.
Yeah, they were.
I'd done
those were
so
real.
much
I wasn't
research.
faking it. There might be some in there that I didn't catch because they were quiet.
All right, now
quieter.
let's see if I can gasp what at today's quote.
Okay, are you ready?
Sure.
When life gives you lemons, just say, fuck the lemons and bail.
I don't know, but it's great.
Okay, one try me. When life gives you lemons, just say, fuck the lemons and bail.
I don't know. What is it? I have no idea what it's from.
Forgetting Sarah Marshall.
You know, I've never seen that movie.
You haven't?
I have never seen
Oh,
it.
you
I'm
should
sorry.
see
I'm
it.
so ashamed. But that quote makes me want to watch it now.
Yeah.
Because that's really good.
Yeah.
When life hands you lemons, you say fuck it and bail.
Right, exactly.
That's awesome.
And it's, he's been on my list since Clueless. Why did I just black out on his name?
You black out at his name?
Blanked out on
say
his
name? Say his name. Tom, and you're like, stop.
Oh, what's his name?
I don't
He's in
know. I've never
Clueless.
seen it. I don't.
And
Which one is he in Clueless? Which one is he in Clueless? Oh, I don't know. Paul Rudd.
Paul Rudd.
Thank you.
No.
No.
Paul Rudd.
Paul Rudd.
Yes.
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 No. It's Paul Rudd.
It's Paul Rudd. In my head, I was like, I connected Paul Rudd to Paul Reiser, and I was like,
Paul Reiser.
from
Reiser from what was it?
The Married,
Bringing Up Baby something. It was
We're
some.
Married, and it was the 90s.
He wrote a
sitcom.
couple books on raising a baby.
He did.
He did, yeah. I know this because I worked at a bookstore at the time, and I'm like, well, of all the people who write a book about
Interesting.
being a father. I mean, good on him, but I
Right.
just didn't expect it.
Yeah. All
Yeah,
right.
it was. Yeah. Sorry, he was in that show with the woman from Twister.
Yes, Helen Hunt.
No, I don't think it's Helen Hunt. Helen Hunt's. It's well, maybe it is.
We're so good with names right now.
We're like, "Bleh." We have all this information
And
on paranormal shit, but when it comes to like practical everyday knowledge, we're fucking just.
And Paul Rudd is like, I've had a crush on him for 1,000 years.
Oh my
and it helps because he
so
doesn't age, so he looks the same
He's so
as he
beautiful.
did.
He's so beautiful.
And funny.
He's the real goat sucker. That's how he maintains his youth. He's immortal because he
He is immortal.
is, and that's I think it's because
He and Keanu.
mutilates cattle.
Yeah. I agree. Now we know. You heard it here first, folks.
We love you, Paul.
Allegedly.
Allegedly,
He is
in
the
our opinion.
Chupacabra. All right. Thank you guys. And remember,
It's okay to sleep with the lights on.